Hello everyone and welcome to a very special Christmas cracker of the UK tonight. We're going to take a look back on the stories that the UK has been talking about this year and of course bringing you a second helping of the weird and wonderful as well. As the NHS faced a year of strikes back in January, you may remember that I got a rather unexpected phone call. It is Sir Rod Stewart. Sir Rod Stewart, good to hear from you this afternoon. Thank you so much for calling in. What made you pick up the phone?
Sarah, hi.
We'll take a look back at Sir Rod Stewart's offer to pay for patients' scans and why he wanted to help. Also coming up, from the coronation to Prince Harry's explosive memoir, it's been a rollercoaster year for the royals. In May, huge crowds braved the rain in London to see King Charles crowned monarch. We're going to be joined by a royal commentator to reflect on the highs as well as the lows. Plus, what would you do if you won the lottery? We'll hear about one man's big break. He quit his job, bought a pool table and went on to represent England at the European Championships this year. And remember this? I caught up with a crane operator behind this incredible rescue from a fire in Reading. And did we find Britain's smelliest cheese this year? I'm going to meet the man behind the Minger and find out if it tastes as strong as it smells. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight's Christmas special. So here we are, it's Christmas, and today we're looking back on 2023. The highs, the lows, the stories and people the UK has been talking about this year. And we're better to start than the NHS. It's faced a year of strikes from doctors to ambulance workers, nurses to physiotherapists. And imagine my surprise when back in January, as we talked about the pressures the health service is facing, a familiar voice called in to Sky News. Thank you so much for calling in. What made you pick up the phone?
Sarah, hi. I've been watching the programme all day, and yesterday I went for my yearly scan, which is private, obviously, and I was 20 minutes late, and I phoned in. I said, I'm terribly sorry, I'll be there. Then I was a half an hour late. I phoned in, I got in there, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm so late. They said, oh, we're not busy at all. We've only got a couple of customers today. I won't tell you where it was, but my point being, this is ridiculous, you know, and I would like to pay 10 for 10 or 20 scans. I don't know how we're going to work this out, and hopefully some other people will follow.
Well, Sir Rod followed through on that offer, and a few weeks later, we spoke once again outside the hospital in Harlow, where the first patients were getting their scans.
On the day I spoke to you, I'd just come back from my scan in a private clinic in Harley Street. And I walked in and I said, I'm terribly, terribly sorry, I'm half hour late. They said, oh, no, it's OK, we haven't got anybody in here today. There was 8 people there with hardly anything to do. And then I thought, this is a terrible injustice. So here we are. But Sarah, I'm here not to talk about politics, please, because otherwise it overshadows what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we made a few headlines, didn't we, last time we spoke?
Yeah.
Well, you tapped into something,
yeah.
Sir Rod, didn't you? That's the thing. I mean, we won't get political, but you probably said what a lot of people at home were thinking and calling into us to say, but because of your platform, it created headlines. And you want to make some noise, right? You want to make some noise about the state of the NHS.
Absolutely, I do. And, you know, I just don't want to do it here. If this is a big success, which I think it will be, I'd like to do it in Belfast, Dublin, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester, and just keep it going. I hope some other people follow me, because I want to prove I am not all mouth and trousers. And that's why I'm here, to prove that I've followed through with it. OK, folk?
Yeah, well, it just took a couple of weeks, in fact, from that phone call to being here in Harlow today. So talk to us about what's behind you and what you're providing for people today.
What's behind me?
So this is the mobile scanning unit, and up to 20 people are going to get scans thanks to your generous donation today.
Yeah. That's it. So hopefully these are people that are finding it trouble to get a scan, either because of the backlog or because of lack of finances. So here I am, the knight in shining armour. And I am a knight, by the way. That's why I feel I want to do good things. Yeah. I'm not doing it for publicity. I get enough of that.
Yeah, that's the thing. You did say when we spoke, and you just said it again there, that you hope this would spark something, that other people would see what you were doing and make
similar generous gestures.
Yeah.
Because you're in a fortunate position, right? And you were upfront about that. You said you could afford to do this, so you are. But you do think that's not sustainable. It shouldn't come to this, should it? It shouldn't take Sir Rod Stewart coming in on his white horse to provide scams for people.
White rolls.
Yeah, white roller.
Whatever it takes. No, it shouldn't. You know, we've got to sort this out. We're in dire straits here.
What would your message be to NHS staff? Because it is grim, it's not getting any better. Junior doctors are going on strike as well since we last spoke.
Yeah,
the pictures got even worse. So what would you say to them to sort of boost their morale? If you
hang in there. I think the junior doctors came back with a counter-offer, which I don't know the number, but I find it to be reasonable. There must be enough money in the coffers to pay up for these nurses. Only 2 years ago we were clapping, and now, bless them, they work so hard. Salt of the earth.
And you're going to keep supporting people, like you said, you want to start this as a trial and perhaps do more.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is a long-term relationship between you and the NHS in terms of giving back, I sense, from the conversations we've had.
Yeah, it is. You know, I mean, I've used the NHS many times when I was little with an ingrowing toenail. They took good care of me when I was 6.
They literally cover everything, don't they?
They do, yeah, even ingrowing toenails.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories that made news throughout the year. We begin in January, the Prime Minister getting into a spot of bother on a visit to Lancashire.
Hi. One of my New Year's promises to you was to grow the economy. And today we're announcing the second round of allocations from our Levelling Up Fund. And that's about investing...
That is Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt, and he was fined for not wearing a seatbelt in a moving car. This was while he filmed that social media video promoting his latest round of levelling up spending. Lancashire Police said it issued a conditional offer of a fixed penalty to a 42-year-old man from London. Number 10 said the Prime Minister accepted that he made a mistake, apologised and paid the fine. Back in February, Volodymyr Zelensky made a surprise visit to the UK, his first since the war in Ukraine began. The Ukrainian president held talks with Rishi Sunak before then meeting King Charles and Ukrainian troops. Zelensky also addressed MPs and peers in Parliament, where he called on the UK to send fighter jets to Kyiv. BBC presenter Gary Lineker was taken off air back in March after criticising the government's asylum policy. The BBC sports programming was hugely disrupted across a whole weekend after Lineker's colleagues walked out in solidarity with the presenter. Well, after the disruption, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, apologised and announced an independent review of the corporation's internal social media guidelines. Gary Lineker was then allowed to return after reaching a deal over his social media use with the BBC. Now, what would you do if you won the lottery? It's a question many of us think about. But for one man I spoke to a little earlier in the year, it became a reality. He is Neil Jones, and he won the lottery and bought a pool table with his winnings. And this year, he went on to win a bronze medal in the European Championships playing for England. Talk about a big break.
I used to play a lot of snooker back in the day, and I sort of fell out of love with it for a second, and I think it was about 8 years that I actually left my cue in the loft, and I went to the local pool hall just to watch some football, believe it or not, and then picked a cue up, and one of the guys said to me, do you fancy having a game? And I knocked a few in, and I progressed from there and went up to just playing in a normal little league, and then going for trials for county, then having a trial for England, which I wasn't very successful with. And then the next thing, COVID come along, and I was practicing, honing my skills.
The luxury of your big win was not just that you could afford a nice pool table, but that you could give up your job as well because you were a tiler. So you didn't buy your way to this success. You had the luxury of time to put in the hours, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, as anybody knows with any sport, you've got to dedicate yourself. When you see yourself getting a little bit better and you sort of progress up through the ranks, you're beating players that you really shouldn't be beating, then I think that's when you give yourself a little pat on the back and you go, do you know what, I can actually do this.
Talk to me about how else the lottery changed your life, because you know, obviously you've been playing pool, your wife, I mean, I read an interview with you where you said, you know, I get the chance to practice while my wife watches Coronation Street. Are you leading a pretty normal life other than this new career in pool?
I'm a totally grounded guy. You know, in Stoke-on-Trent, there's a fantastic standard of pool anyway, and you can't get above your station in this area because you've got your friends that'll just shoot you down. In other words, you know, you can't get above your station. You just got to earn your respect, and that's all I've ever wanted out of pool is just for somebody to say, do you know what, Neil Jones, he's a good player, and that's all I've ever wanted out of pool.
Oh.
And at the end, I've ended up with little gone there. So happy days.
Love that story. Now, earlier this year, Sky News uncovered a hidden crisis. Hidden because people were simply ashamed to talk about it. Families with babies going hungry because they couldn't afford formula, a basic essential. Our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter, persuaded some of those parents to talk to Sky News to highlight the scale of this problem, to call for help. And since then, it's an issue that's been raised in Parliament, by the World Health Organization and by the competition's watchdog, which has now launched its own investigation. Let's take a look back at how it all began and hear from one of the parents who opened up to Tom about the desperate measures that they were taking to feed their children, even resorting to stealing.
We manage our money normally. It's just when we're really desperate, we'll do anything for them, even though it's a break of the law. It's wrong, and it makes me feel horrible, stealing. But you got to do what's right for him because he needs it. Can't give him anything else.
Our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter, is with me in the studio now. I mean, Tom, what a year it has been for this story. This is something you began at the start of the year, but it wasn't until, was it May, that you could get somebody to come on camera to explain what's happening to families. Talk to me about the impact that this has had since that initial report.
Well, before we broadcast that report with that mother in the southwest of England in May, this was a hidden scandal, but it was also hidden from sight because it was described to us in many ways when we were looking into it as a public health crisis, a shocking example of destitution in some families, unfortunately, and also something that people felt a great deal of stigma and shame around. They didn't feel the confidence to be able to say, look, this is a problem. I can't feed my children because of the obvious consequences that might have for those families. And so our national team, our producer, Emily Upton, our shoot edit camera, John Anthony, and myself, just the three of us went off around the country trying to piece it all together. And it was all of those things in one. And we put out that investigation in May, and really it's been a story that we've told throughout the whole year. Yeah,
it really sparked something, didn't it? And the reach of your team's reporting, I mean, I touched on it there, it's been discussed in Parliament, it's been raised by the World Health Organization. It really feels like the conversation has started properly.
Yeah, I've spent over 2 decades in journalism, and of all the stories that I've covered, it's the one that has had, I think, the most impact and the one that's felt the most meaningful because of the situations that families are in, often behind closed doors, up and down the United Kingdom. And it has shocked people, and I think it has really tested people's resolve. People just can't accept that that is going on, that babies are going hungry or being... their parents have to feed them unsafe foods, and that's, in some cases, the only thing that some babies can have.
Because some parents are buying it second-hand, aren't they? Yeah. On, you know, on social media platforms, open tins of formula.
Yeah, it's desperate, really, and it was described to us as horrendous. And as you say, lots of people have taken up this cause since, including the World Health Organization. We spoke to them in Geneva, and they said quite categorically that British families are being exploited.
When you see that these prices are being driven down to the consumers and having to pay extremely high prices, they're in a very vulnerable situation, that they have infants that have to be fed, and there aren't many alternatives out there for them, and there aren't really other companies they can turn to, then we would say, yes, that you're exploiting them to increase the profits of these companies, and they have huge profit margins. As these prices go higher and higher, and it's going to be reaching beyond their limits, we really want to make sure we're not making mothers feel guilty. This is not their fault. This is problems that the government hasn't stepped up and supported them in ways that they need to.
So, Tom, the momentum's building. Where is this going to go in 2024?
People are aware of this now, and there's been a huge sea change in people's thinking, people advocating for change, calls for a price cap for this product. Things will continue to develop in 2024. And amidst all this, what is a quite shocking, depressing story, really, there's a real heartwarming grassroots fundraising effort, over £60,000 raised as a direct result of our reporting, and that now is feeding babies up and down the UK.
OK, well, let's hang on to that positivity and continue it into 2024. We'll follow this with you, Tom. Thank you. Now, have you got rizz? Not sure? Well, rizz was 2023's Word of the Year, according to Oxford University Press. Well, here to tell us what it means and to share some other words that might be rather useful this festive season is Countdown's Susie Dent. She is also the author of interesting stories about curious words. Susie, hello to you.
Hello, lovely to see you.
Yeah, really lovely to see you. So, rizz, what's it all about?
Well, it's interesting. There were a lot of contenders on the shortlist this year, actually, but rizz was the one that I think really captured the imagination. And we think, although we're not sure, the detective work will still go on, that it's a probable shortening of charisma, because rizz is that certain charm, that X factor, that sort of sex appeal that makes you stand out from the crowd. Really very popular in online spaces. It shows the influence of places like TikTok, for example, where it's morphing into a verb. So you can rizz someone up with a charm offensive, and apparently you can even wear rizz-coloured glasses if you rate rizz or rizzness above all others. So definitely a word on the move.
Susie, you're so good on social media at making people aware of words that have got out of fashion but are quite timely for, you know, what may be happening that day, that week. What kind of words would you like to see people sprinkle into conversation over a glass of fizz this festive season?
Well, if they have got a glass of fizz in their hands, then it's definitely quaff-tide, which I love. So quaff-tide is the kind of single-word announcement that it's time for a drink, or it's the season for a drink. Better than gin o'clock, I think. There's also a brilliant word that I tweet every Christmas, and that is scurryfunging, which is over a century old, and it comes from a US dialect. And to scurryfunge is to madly dash about the house, shoving stuff into cupboards and under sofas just before guests arrive. So it's that frantic tidying up when you actually see guests walking down the road. So that's a great one. Yule hole.
I'm just writing that one down.
Yes, we are scurryfungers. So scurry, as in I'm scurrying around, and then the funge is F-U-N-G-E.
Got it. I'm going to text my husband to do a bit of that before Christmas Day.
Oh, yeah, very good idea. And then we might all reach for our Yule hole, which sounds a bit odd, but the Yule hole specifically, and again, this is centuries old, the Yule hole is the furthest notch on your belt that you might have to resort to after a Christmas blowout.
Still to come on this special Christmas edition of the UK Tonight, the hero sheepdog who rescued 3 ewes from floodwater on a farm in Wales, and remember this sound? If you don't, we'll tell you what it's all about after the break. Hello, welcome back. You're watching a special Christmas cracker edition of the UK Tonight. Now, back in May, thousands of people braved the rain and took to the streets of London for an historic moment, the crowning of a new king. It was the first coronation in more than 70 years, and King Charles was formally declared monarch and Camilla became queen. The ceremony in Westminster Abbey was attended by royals, politicians and world leaders as the Archbishop of Canterbury crowned the first king since 1937. Well, I spent the day down on the Mall, where thousands of people had come from far and wide to line the streets.
Sharon, why did you feel the need to travel across the world to be here today? Because you travelled on your own as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I mean, this is the most important event for the world, for you know, lots and lots of years. It's just an event you can't miss, really. It's just amazing, yeah.
Well, you've got the outfit, you've acquired some friends. who are all shouting Sharon's name before, because it must be quite daunting to come down here. You've been camping since yesterday on your own, but it's a real sort of community spirit.
It's an amazing community spirit. We've met so many people. It's a really coming together of people across Britain. It's just fantastic.
Why did you feel the need to be here today? I mean, you're looking at me and rolling your eyes as if to say, oh, we're nearly at the end of it. We've nearly got to the prize.
Why? Because I think the British monarchy is the backbone of Great Britain, and it brings so much pleasure to so many people, and without it, it's a massive asset for this country and for the Commonwealth, and I think globally as well. If you look around here, you've got people from every country across the world, and it's just fabulous. And like you said, we've had a bit of a miserable time recently with the cost of living crisis, and this is a great day to just come out and have a bit of fun.
And we certainly did just that. Well, aside from the coronation, another member of the royal family hasn't been far from the headlines this year, from Prince Harry's explosive book published back in January to winning £140,000 in damages from the Mirror in his phone hacking case in December. To discuss that, with me in the studio, royal commentator Afua Hagan. Afua, hello.
Hello.
Now, I can't work out whether the publishing of his memoir, Spare, was a high or a low from Prince Harry. What was your verdict?
I think it was probably both, to be honest. It was a high for him because, you know, he got out what he wanted to say. I think the low point probably was when we had all the leaks in the papers in the days leading up. He was pretty furious about that. He wanted to be able to control the narrative as to how it came out. He was doing those interviews, he was doing his own personal publicity around it. And then the leaks came. But actually, you know, it was a huge seller, which was brilliant for him. Brilliant for Penguin that published it. And like I said, he said what he needed and wanted to say. So definitely a high note for him.
High note for him, probably bit of a low for the rest of the royal family. I wonder if Spare will be in a few Christmas stockings at the end of this year. Let's talk about something that was definitely a high, rounding off 2023 with that win in the courts against the Mirror Group newspapers for Prince Harry. He said he felt vindicated.
He really did, and he should. You know, 15 out of the 33 stories that he put forward in the Mirror Group newspapers over a period of time leading up to 2011, a judge ruled that, in fact, phone hacking or other sort of illegal means of news gathering was used. And he has said that that is his life's work, that his mission in life is to hold newspapers accountable. And so he's been able to do that in this case. Now, he has 2 other cases against huge newspaper groups as well in the next 12 months. And the judges there will be looking at that judgment to see how that was, and he will be fired up for those cases going forward.
Well, as Prince Harry said, the mission continues in 2024. Afua, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, let's take a look at some of the other stories that made news throughout the course of the year. In April, the US President visited Belfast to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Joe Biden spent just over half a day in Northern Ireland. He met the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and he also urged Northern Irish political leaders to restore their power-sharing government. Let's stay with news from April. And how many of you remember this sound? Well, you may remember that is the sound of the UK's emergency alert system. It was tested nationwide for the first time on Sunday, the 23rd of April. It sounded at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, with people across the country getting that very distinct sound and vibration to their phones, accompanied by the message you can see on your screen. Well, ministers hope it's going to get the public used to what those alerts look like and sound like in the future in case of crises such as extreme weather, flooding and wildfires. Now, we are fans of a dramatic rescue here on the UK Tonight, and our next story has all the elements. 3 ewes stranded, floodwaters rising, and a hero to save them all. Well, they were saved by Patsy the sheepdog, swimming through flooded fields in Flintshire to rescue those 3 ewes who became stuck on the wrong side of rising floodwater. Farmer Leah Jones shared his footage online, saying that Patsy earned herself an extra biscuit for her troubles. Well, I caught up with them both earlier this year. Talk me through what happened. I know it's all in a day's work for Patsy, but that was pretty impressive given the level of water.
Yeah, well, to be honest, we'd gone down to check the U's, and yeah, to be honest, I didn't want to get my feet wet, so I basically mentioned that I gave her the command, not 100% sure she was going to do it, and but she didn't hesitate. Off she went, and she never hesitated.
Patsy's gone viral on social media. You're also on Sky News on the UK Tonight. I can understand you not wanting to get your feet wet. That's quite some flood water. Oh, look at Patsy here. Look, he's so pleased with herself. Well done, Patsy. Hope she got more than 1 or 2 biscuits for that. Just to end, what's the call you give to Patsy when she has to go and herd the sheep?
Away. Oh.
Away.
Yeah, well, Patsy. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. She's always on call.
Claire, really good to hear from you tonight. Give Patsy a good pat from us here at Sky News. Thank you for being such good sports. Still to come on this UK Tonight Christmas special, we'll be looking back at the amazing World Cup run for the Lionesses with our sports presenter Jackie Beltrao and...
One more time!
Well, he was the unexpected highlight from the Ryder Cup. I spoke to the Scottish man who got a little bit carried away with his celebrations after Europe's win. Hello and welcome back to a special edition of the UK Tonight, where we're taking a look back at some of the best bits from the last year. Over the summer, England's hopes and dreams rested on 11 pairs of shoulders as the Lionesses made it all the way to the final of the World Cup out in Australia. They missed out on glory, Spain winning in that final 1-0. But in the process, they continued to inspire a generation of girls and women. Well, their tournament wasn't without its controversies. You'll remember the outcry after the kit supplier, Nike, decided not to produce a replica of keeper Mary Earp's shirt. She went on to win the Golden Glove for her performances, and sure enough, a couple of months later, Nike released a batch of shirts that sold out in a matter of hours. You can't get them for love nor money. Well, Sky News spoke to Mary in December.
I've been speaking tonight quite a bit over the course of the year on this topic. You know, they know that they got this wrong, and that's why they've done this correction. And a big company like Nike, they wouldn't do that if they didn't know that it wasn't right and that there was an injustice there. So I think it's great to see that they did the right thing, and really I can't thank the public enough really for their support. We would not be in this position without it.
Well, our sports presenter Jackie Beltrao is here with me in the studio. Jackie was lucky enough to be out in Australia following the Lionesses, and I just want to start by talking about Mary Earp, because she didn't just have a moment in 2023, she started a movement.
Mary is a very popular girl. I mean, the fact you can't still get her shirt right now, it just shows you how popular she is. They actually slid some shirts onto the market after the World Cup. Yeah. They sold out quickly. Then there was another lot that went out there. They sold out quickly. You actually can't get a Mary Earp shirt. I mean, she's a fantastic character. She loves a bit of a dance and a song. She's got great fun about her. She's a real character. And she's a brilliant goalkeeper. Golden Gloves, you know. What else can you say? And there's so many pictures and videos on social media of girls meeting her at games this season and bursting into tears. Like, that's the effect she's having on young girls. She's a massive star. And that moment in the match when she saved a penalty in that final, and then she sort of burst out with this big expletive. Yeah. It kind of sort of cemented her legend just a little bit more.
Yeah, she's got real passion, hasn't she? Yeah. But let's talk about the Lionesses overall in that tournament, because it really was a focal point of the summer, wasn't it, for so many? Actually, England going into that tournament, I mean, people didn't expect them to do that well for so many reasons.
No, I mean, Serena Wiegmann really put a brave face on it and said, you know, we've got great strength and depth, but the fact is They went into that tournament without their best goal scorer, Beth Mead. She had ruptured her ACL. Leah Williamson, the captain, a really key part of that team, a really key part of them winning the Euros, also had injured her ACL. She wasn't going. Frank Kirby also had a knee injury. There were retirements as well. So
expectations were low.
Expectations were not as high. And certainly the way they played in the early stages of the World Cup, it was even lower because they never really seemed to sort of get going and get out of second gear, but were somehow winning. And then suddenly they got to the semi-finals against Australia, and it burst into life, really, for the Lionesses, and you comprehensively beat the Australians. And when you were over there, they never thought they were going to lose. The Matildas never thought they would lose to England. And when they did, it was pretty awful to be there. To get to the final, I think they would have taken that before it started. The first half was very much all of Spain. It was very one-sided. And when you were watching in the stadium, myself and the producer were sitting there thinking, this is going to be a bit of a flat, damp squib at the end. Second half, they tried their best, they fought really hard, and they just couldn't overcome that 1-0 first half goal. But if at the beginning of it you said you're going to get to the final, you're going to have the chance of being world champions, I think they would have
probably taken those.
They'd have taken it, but they were gutted. And it would take a long time.
They were gutted.
To
You
get
could see
over
that. You could see that as they left the hotel. But what we were looking at when they left that hotel was, you know, the legacy continues. They did brilliantly. By their standards, of course, they wanted to win the World Cup. But going into 2024, the women's game, the girls' game, is just going to get bigger and better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can see it, you can be it. And lots of young girls see them and think, oh, look at their ponytails, look at their kit. I could actually look like that. And if I train hard, I could be them in the future. And the fact you've got 59,000 plus going to watch, you know, a league game, a WSL game, just a couple of weeks ago, Arsenal-Chelsea, tells you all that you need to know. And we didn't even mark that. It was like, oh, yeah, that always happens.
It's just the natural order of things now, as it should be. We're looking forward to following the Lionesses and the women's game in 2024. Jackie, thank you so much. Right, let's take a look at some of the other stories that made news throughout the year in the UK. It may well seem like a distant memory now we're in the depths of winter. But remember the country having its hottest June on record? That was according to the Met Office this year. The average monthly temperature of 15.8 degrees Celsius eclipsed the last hottest by nearly a full degree. Scientists say that climate change made the chance of surpassing the previous joint record at least twice as likely. Staying with heat, and thousands of British holidaymakers were forced to flee the Greek islands of Rhodes and Corfu after wildfires broke out in July. UK airlines ran repatriation flights as temperatures across the islands reached highs of 45 degrees Celsius. In August, 2 supermoons dazzled stargazers across the world, including right here in the UK. The supermoon phenomenon takes place when a full moon is near its closest point to Earth, making it appear up to 14% bigger and 30% brighter compared to when it is furthest away. Well, another thing that kept us glued to our screens this summer, the cultural phenomenon known as Barbenheimer. The release of 2 of the year's most talked about films on the same weekend. The films, of course, Barbie and Oppenheimer. You can see what they did there. Both films saw sold-out screenings and dedicated fans doing the double. The Vue cinema chain said it had its biggest weekend for ticket sales in more than 4 years. But one of those films really got us talking. Let's take a look.
Hey, Barbie. Can I come to your house tonight?
Sure. I don't have anything big planned, just a giant blowout party with all the Barbies and planned choreography and a bespoke song. You should stop by.
So cool.
You can find me under the lights, diamonds under my eyes.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever. So is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying?
Well, I loved it, and millions of people loved it, and it made over $1 billion. Katie Spencer, our arts and entertainment correspondent with me.
International box office takings, $1.1
billion.
Don't forget the .1
now. It's insane, really, given that this is just the sort of childhood doll that we've all grown up with. But look, in a world of superhero movies, doesn't this say something about the fact that we want original films? We don't want these franchise films anymore, and this has been a beautiful way of proving it. It is totally, totally bonkers, the fact that it's taken these two completely different films. One's like a 3-hour harrowing sort of meta take on, the nuclear weapons and what have you, and
it's quite heavy.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy. And then you team that up with a double billing of Barbie. So it's been brilliant.
What way round did you see them? Because that was the big debate, wasn't it? Did you do Barbie first and then Oppenheimer, or did you do it the other way around?
I did separate days because I'm no fool. I'm not going to go and see those double billings. But for me, I mean, while many people have said Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is just, some people say it's his best work to date. For me, I mean, I kind of prefer some of his other works to this one. But for me, Barbie was the one that did it. I mean, we've got new words as a result of this. Kenergy. Are we all channeling our Kenergy now for 2023 into 2024? This kind of beautiful ditzy world that Ryan Gosling has created for us.
It was so brilliant, and there was so much more to it than you thought. It was a film with real depth and some really important messaging. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's the festive period. Kick back. If there's any chocolates left, watch Barbie or Oppenheimer, depending on what mood you're in.
Depending how sad you are.
Yeah, depending on how sad you're feeling. Let's talk about Russell Brand, shall we? Because he has not had a good 2023. Just explain to us the context in which he found himself this year.
Yeah, it's been quite the year for the comedian come YouTuber. I think going into 2024, the question will be whether or not charges are actually brought against him. We're ending 2023, of course, with Russell Brand now having been questioned twice by the Metropolitan Police. All of these allegations stemming originally from the documentary that was and the subsequent reporting within the Times.
And remind us of the allegations.
It was allegations of rape, of sexual assault, of emotional abuse, of inappropriate behaviour within the workplace at the time when he was working for Radio 2, but also for Channel 4 on Big Brother. It also raised issues around, or debates really, within surrounding the issues around the age of consent. We know that one of the claims that was made was in relation to a 16-year-old schoolgirl that he allegedly sent cars to pick her up from school. We should stress as well, Russell Brand throughout this has vehemently denied that he ever did anything wrong. He says that all of his sexual encounters were always consensual. And he's continued within his own little space within the online world to make his daily videos. He's moved away from YouTube because they took away his ability to make money when these allegations surfaced. He's now on the platform Rumble. He's still getting the hits within his world of sort of conspiracy theories. People are still tuning in to watch him.
OK, well, that's a story that will continue into 2024. Katie, thank you. Katie Spencer, our arts and entertainment correspondent. Now, do you remember this rather unexpected but brilliant moment from the Ryder Cup back at the beginning of October?
One more time. One more time.
A Scottish golf fan getting rather excited there after Team Europe beat Team USA, leaping into the water on the 16th hole. It's a huge support, as you heard there, from the crowd. Well, John Burley became an internet sensation, the video racking up millions of views, and I spoke to him back in October. Talk me through what was going through your mind after Team Europe won and you headed towards the lake.
Well, at the time, it was really to cool off. It was such excitement, and we were all stewing with the heat. It was 33 degrees, and it was such a drama, very dramatic. And so earlier on, we had seen the promotions of the players jumping in the water in the promotional videos that interrupted every now and again, and it kind of put a seed in my head. And so when it came to the moment, there was that little gap, and I just went for it, to be honest with you.
I love that. And Tommy Fleetwood's caddy nearly tackled you. You just dodged him and jumped into the lake not once, but 3 times, and came out to lead a Viking clap as well. And did you expect the kind of response you got afterwards? Because you became one of the stars of the Ryder Cup. Quite a few selfies, people coming up to talk to you.
Yeah, it was quite surprising. And, well, the crowd were behind me, right? There's no denying that. With their cheers and the clapping and their singing. You know, it was a very happy, joyous occasion. And actually, when I came out of the water, Molinaro, he came up and congratulated me, and he says, "Well done," and shook my hand, and he says, "That was good." So that was a nice, positive statement. And yeah, it was all good. It was all good. And, done in the best possible taste, you know. I know I'm wearing my hat now, right, but I did take it off because it's made of wool and I didn't want... It's called a Scottish sombrero. It keeps the sun off. So, there you go.
Well, I love that you operate sun sense by wearing a Scottish sombrero and going into the water when it's too hot. John, very sensible moves. And you are now an internet sensation. I know you went to pick your wife up from the airport in your soggy clothes and she got off that flight wondering why everyone was asking you for selfies and why on earth you were sopping wet. I bet she's seen that video a fair few times now. John Burley, thank you so much for joining us. What a great sport. Still to come on this UK Tonight Christmas cracker, my interview with the hero crane driver who rescued a worker from a burning building in Reading back in November. We'll speak to the man behind the Migger, one of the country's smelliest cheeses, and I'm going to let you know how it tastes. Welcome back to the UK Tonight's Christmas special. Back in November, we brought you the incredible rescue of a workman caught in a fire at a tower block in Reading. Crane operator Glenn Edwards has been hailed as a hero after using a cage to rescue the man who was trapped by the flames with no other means of escape. The rescued man was treated for smoke inhalation in hospital, but Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service said things could have been very different if it wasn't for Glenn's actions. Well, I met the man himself and asked him to tell me what happened.
I looked out my left window and I could see the smoke, so I just hoisted up and slewed round to put the concrete skip on the ground. And they said, yeah, you have to come out the crane as well. So I got the skip off and my chains and I started hoisting up. And I slew back round and I looked out my left window, and as I looked out my left window, one of the guys on the ground shouted out, "There's a guy on level 8." And I stopped what I was doing and I looked out on level 8 where he was, and he was waving his coat.
From watching the video footage of that day, you could see him desperately trying to get in the cage, but inching back because the smoke was so thick.
The smoke and the heat.
And you could see the area where he was standing. You knew he didn't have that much space.
No, he had about 2 metres. He was standing on about 2 square metres there. That wasn't a light. So, and when I touched down the cage, there was materials on the floor. So the cage started to tilt a little bit. Yeah, and the wind caught the block then, and it started pulling the cage over. I thought, no, lucky it came back. And then I heard the cage go down, and then the banksman said, he's in, he's in. So, then I heard the crowd outside. They were all shouting as well. I could hear all that as well. So, yeah, and then up and away, pulled the lever right back as fast as I could, get him out of there.
What's been the reaction since your rescue?
It's been phenomenal, actually. My phone hasn't stopped, obviously. There's a guy called Jordan. He set me up a GoFundMe page. Well, apparently, I don't know, that's gone out the roof, apparently, which is very nice. You know, and I'd like to thank everyone that has donated. That's been amazing.
What does that mean to you, that kind of response? You were just doing your job and your instinct and your training as well.
Yeah, some of the comments and that, you know, have just been absolutely fantastic. You know, I've sat down this afternoon and had a read through some of them.
And you haven't yet met the man you rescued?
I haven't met him at all.
Are you going to?
Oh, yeah, yes, I hope so. Yeah, oh dear, yeah. He's got to take me across the road for a drink yet.
Well, not all heroes wear capes. Some of them operate cranes. Right, let's take a look at some more of the stories that made news in the UK over the last year. In September, a manhunt was launched in southwest London after a terror suspect allegedly escaped from Wandsworth Prison. Daniel Khalif was on the run for 4 days before being caught by a plainclothes police officer in nearby Northolt. In Northumberland, the iconic sycamore gap tree next to Hadrian's Wall was chopped down in September in what police called a deliberate act of vandalism. A man in his 60s was arrested on suspicion of felling the tree, but will now face no further action, while 2 men in their 30s remain on bail. Also in November, stargazers across the UK treated to this stunning display of the Northern Lights. People saw the lights all around the country, including as far south as Norfolk and Suffolk. And in November, the long and winding road came to an end for one of the biggest ever bands. This is after the Beatles released their final song, Now and Then, originally written and recorded by John Lennon in the late 1970s. The single features all of the Fab Four. It was finished in the studio by Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Ringo Starr, with AI helping to piece together Lennon's vocals and George Harrison's rhythm guitar parts. Now, we always like to leave you with something weird or wonderful on the UK tonight, and this story might fall into both of those categories. That is, if you're a fan of cheese. My next guest has produced this, what could be the UK's and maybe even one of the world's smelliest cheeses. It's known as the Minger, and the man behind the Minger is cheesemaker Rory Stone, who joins me now from Tain. Rory, hello to you.
Good evening.
It is rather smelly. I am not going to be liked by any presenter that comes in after me here in the Glassbox studio because it is whiffy. What goes into making such a smelly cheese?
It's a special process of just washing the rinds. And I had no idea why this occurred or why it was even, how it was even came to be. But apparently the Trappist monks, Belgium, France, they used to wash cheeses in beer, sometimes in ale or in brine, and it would create this really malodorous whiff, but also give a very sort of proteiny flavor, very sort of unctuous and meaty to the cheese. And at particular points of religious observance, when they weren't allowed to go out and slaughter anything, they would have cheese as an alternative, and that filled a gap for them.
How do you know if this is one of the smelliest cheeses in Britain, if not the world? What's the scale? What's the comparison? How do we compare to, say, the French?
I'm afraid to say it's quite an arrogance for us to have suggested that, and it certainly caught the imagination.
It's not arrogance, it's confidence. It's confidence.
I don't know how you can measure it. I think the effect is normally when you open the pack, you think, it's not that bad. But if you leave it in the room and come back in 20 minutes later, then you really do know all about it. There are many wash-drying cheeses in the world, and the French, I mean, I've never had an original idea in my life. I'm just nicking it from our friends over the English Channel. So quite, if I can get away with that claim, I'm going to hold on for it for a while.
Rory, could you put into words what it smells like? Because I'm struggling.
The bacterium that develops on the rind likes to live in hot, sweaty places. It's called Brevibacterium linens. And that's why old welly boots comes to mind. It lives near your feet, in your armpits. So if you haven't washed for a while and you've kept your wellies on for a fortnight, that's pretty much the whiff. But the whiff does not give way to the flavor. They should be two separate things. And that's what I think is fun about it, is that people recoil in horror. And then actually, if they dare to taste it, they think, well, hang on, that's not too bad.
Does it taste as strong as it smells? I mean, I don't know if you can see my eyes watering in the studio. The smell is quite pungent.
I happen to know that you've got a pretty ripe example. So either it's Happy Christmas for me or the end of a
Rory, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us about what could be Britain's smelliest cheese. A welcome addition, I'm sure, to cheese lovers' festive cheese boards this time of year. Rory, thank you. That's all from the UK Tonight's Christmas Cracker. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen, and we'll see you in the new year.